Hey everyone, welcome to Nobodies Making Noise, a series that aims to celebrate independent music and share the musical journeys of artists directly from the artists themselves. This right here is episode 1, and I couldn't think of a better way to kick things off than a conversation with 12 Days in June drummer Adam Soucy. Okay, so full disclosure, it's a little bit of shameless self-promotion because we've just released a new album, Stone Tape Theory. But truthfully, Adam and I have actually never spoken face to face in the 5 years that we've known each other. So this felt like a perfect opportunity. He's an extremely talented dude with an incredible story, and I cannot wait to share it with you. Now, like I said, this is episode 1. If people like it, then I'll keep going because there are certainly plenty of folks out there whom I would love an opportunity to chat with. But for now, let's dive in and meet Adam Soucy. Adam Soucy here on my podcast or whatever
in
this
the
is going to be. Man, it is so awesome to finally be face to face with you. We've been working together for 5 years, but have never actually talked in person. So this is an honor and a treat for me. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, likewise, man. I've really been looking forward to this ever since you asked me. And yeah, dude, it is crazy to think like we have texted a ton, we've Instagram DM'd a ton, we've done email chains, the Sound Better messenger system. We've never had a phone call and we've never done a FaceTime like this. So yeah, really glad to finally meet you for real.
Yeah, likewise. And I assume that like we've just never talked face to face. Everything's just been perfect for 5 years. So, just no need. No, I'm kidding. No, this is super cool. I'm really excited to chat with you. Obviously, we've got a lot of 12 Days in June stuff to get into, and we will. But I'd also like to just kind of use this opportunity, not just for anybody who may be watching or listening to this, but for my own personal curiosity, just really kind of talking a bit about you, more about your background. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start with like probably a generic question, but something I'm curious about is like, what is your earliest memory of kind of music connecting with you? Like, did you grow up in a musical household?
Yeah, so I did, and actually, you can see a picture of my dad up in the corner here playing guitar. So my dad has worked in the music industry his whole life on the product side of things. And when he was in his 20s, he also did like the professional musician thing for a while. And my mom, while not a musician herself, has always been like the big music fan of the family. So I got exposed to a lot of this stuff very early on. But as for like the moment that I knew I wanted to play drums, I think I was around like 6 years old or something. And I was watching a Carlos Santana concert of all things with my dad. And I just thought that like the drummer was ripping and I just wanted to do that. So the rest is kind of history from there.
That's pretty awesome. Like I always catch people by surprise when they ask me like, obviously you're a Smashing Pumpkins fan, like who are some of your biggest influences? And I have to go back and say, about the time, and I think it's similar to you, like about the time I was 6 years old and like MTV was like starting to, make its thing. So I was a little older, probably 8. And I remember seeing the video for Photograph by Def Leppard and like, it just made such a massive impact on me. And I'm like, even at that age, I knew Stephen Clark was like just a badass guitar player, and it was like never look back. But that's cool. Like, so, was there like, obviously like that's kind of like the original inspiration, but like, was there kind of an album or a song that, kind of reaffirmed your passion and love for wanting to pursue music and drums in particular?
Yeah, so this part's interesting because like I had that initial spark and I started taking lessons and doing like the school music program thing. But it didn't like click until I was about like 12 years old when this like a little earlier than that, I think my friends and I got really into Green Day's American Idiot of all things because very, very time and place, 2004 kind of stuff. So I was initially like really into that like pop punk side of things, but somewhere down the line, like my dad started showing me more of his favorite records, and like my uncles and other family members started just like buying me albums now that they knew that I was into music and stuff. And Rush ended up being like the thing when I was in my like early teens. I was so fascinated by the design of those songs and the sort of like, it was the first time that I was listening to music in a way that made me sort of analyze like the individual pieces of the arrangement. And I got like really hyper focused on that. And that's when like I got bit by the practicing bug, and I was just like playing drums all the time. So Rush's Permanent Waves, I think, was like my first real big one.
I mean, that's fair. So obviously, like, people have a lot of opinions about like who's the greatest drummer of all time. So we're not going to answer that, but I am curious kind of who are some of like your most your biggest influences, or some of like your most cherished drummers.
Gavin Harrison's a real big one, which comes to the surprise of no one anytime that I tell them that. Yeah, love Gavin. And it's not even like a technical prowess thing for me. Like I'm very attracted to how musical his playing is, and how considerate like a lot of the choices he makes are, and his time feel I think is excellent. So he's a big one. Dave King, the drummer for the Bad Plus, who's they're like an experimental jazz group that I got really, really into when I was in college. He just approaches the instrument in like such a free and completely different way to everything that I do, that I just find to be really inspiring. Like when you see him play live, he has like Fisher Price toys and stuff that he pulls out from behind the drum set and just like rubs them on the heads and stuff. It's crazy, some of the sounds that he gets. So he's a really big one. And then Aaron Sterling is a huge inspiration on me. And anybody that's listening that doesn't know who he is actually knows who he is, because he has played on like every single pop record that's come out in the last 20 years. Like he is the guy, you know. Aaron Sterling and Josh Freese kind of cover all of mainstream music from everything that came out from like 2000 onward.
Well, that's very cool. So one of the things that I've been really excited to talk to you about, because it's something that I've known about you since the beginning, you and I started working together, but I don't know that a lot of people know this about you. You were actually, I don't want to throw around child prodigy here, but like you obviously took to the drums very, very early, at a very young age, had experience that people 3 times your age at that time, you know, had yet to experience. So I want to talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that really drew me to you as a musician looking for a drummer to work with was that you had already had this like multitude of experience. You had already played massive shows and like in front of large crowds, but rather than kind of taking ego about it, your stance was like, hey, this is an experience I want other musicians to have. So I want to do what I can to help bring that experience to people, which I think is really cool. So take me back to a 14-year-old Adam Soucy. You're sitting behind the kit, performing in front of like a massive audience. And that's the moment that kind of, you say, shaped your path as a musician. So tell me about what that's like in your 30s, looking back now.
I mean, you know, it's so funny because like I go through periods now, especially when I'm working really heavy, and burnout is real, right? But even when I'm at like my most burned out, there's always some spark that I just feel so attached to when I'm on stage, or tracking something that I'm really proud of, that always, without fail, every single time takes me back to like that moment that I talked about on my website. So at the time, so I'm 14. I am 80 pounds soaking wet. I was playing in a post-hardcore band called Horns Became Halos at the time, which that album is right there. Yeah, that was the first recording that I was ever on. It came out in 2009, and it actually reappeared on streaming last year, which is kind of fun. So that's out there for people to actually listen to now. But yeah, it was a really strange time because I was very young. I was punching above my weight a little bit, at least with a lot of my school friends, and everybody else in that band was 5 or 6 years older than me. And they had just more experience, and I learned a ton about like songwriting and everything from them. And as soon as I kind of like entered that fold, I felt like something was actually like kind of happening, and like we had a decent draw in our area. And that special show that I talked about, we were playing this place called the Sad Cafe in Plastow, New Hampshire, of all places, which is like a 200 cap room. Like, it wasn't big, but it was really cool, and we did sell it out. And yeah, without fail, every single song that we played, the audience was singing along. And I had never had that experience before, and I've only had it really like a handful of times since, because it's so unbelievably like euphoric and special to feel like not only seen, but just this level of shared camaraderie with strangers, you know. It's just so incredibly special, of like, oh, like these are my people and I'm their people, and it's just really special. Yeah, so if I can do anything to facilitate that happening for anybody else, I want to do it, because yeah, it's so rare and unique as an experience.
I mean, that's such a cool, selfless attitude to have about it, because I mean, you really could have gone either way with it, right? Like, it could have been this massive ego-defining moment, or it could have been, you know, the path that you took, which is like, you know, wanting to help others kind of achieve that same level. So I don't want to compare your experience to that of a child actor, but I imagine there's some similarity, you know, about experiencing something like that at such a young age. So I'm curious, with that experience, again, like that people in their 20s and 30s and beyond, you know, may never experience, and you've already had that, you know, at the age of 14. Does it kind of set the bar for you? Like, now you've had a taste of what this life is like, you want to get back to it, you want to be in a full-time band, you want to be touring, selling out, or selling out shows, or is it more like your goals have shifted because you've had that experience? It's like, you know what, been there, done that, I'm ready to do something different now as a musician.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of a balance of both, where you know, you have a standard that I have a standard that I would like to maintain at minimum, and that is this like ever shifting goalpost. So because I never want to feel like I'm stagnating, you know. And you know, like by proxy, like, yeah, like playing a sold out 200 seat room when I was 14 felt like the biggest thing that had ever happened to me. And then, you know, a decade later, when I'm 24 and touring with Brooks Young Band, and we're playing 3,000 seat rooms, like, it's a little bit different. Goalpost moved. Yeah, so there is like it's less about sort of like chasing the dragon and like never quite hitting that that high that I felt. So it never turned into like this toxic sort of like self-hating thing for me, which is, I'm really grateful. But the other thing is that, like, you know, the part of the reason this has always been so special to me is because I feel so connected to the music that I make. So that's the real thing that I'm always after, is like, I want to be working on something and making something that I feel deeply connected with and am proud of. And that takes all shapes, sizes, and forms, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a good segue to talk about your work as a session musician, because obviously, again, you have this great depth of experience, you know, working in bands, touring, playing massive shows, and then you kind of reach a point where, you know, maybe there's just new opportunities with the advancement of technology that just hadn't been there. You know, once upon a time, a session musician was you had to live near the studio or at least be willing to travel to it when they made the call. But with the advent, obviously, of different tools available on the internet, such as 12 Days in June, for example, you're now able to kind of lend your services ad hoc. So what prompted you to kind of go down that path? Did you hear about Sound Better and think it was a really good idea, or is it something you had already been thinking about and then we're excited to find a platform?
It's that. It is 100% that. Because so like I said, like my first recorded performance, I was super young. I went to music college as a music business major, but I always lived with sound recording people the entire time I was there. So I was always like working on their projects, and that was like the most amount of time that I had spent in like a real studio setting. When I got out of school, there was a studio that I got like the sort of like house drummer gig at. I was there for like 9 months or something like that, and like 3, 4, 5 days a week I was just going in and playing on whatever was coming through the door, which that was like a really interesting time in my life. But the more that I did it, and the more like engineers that I worked with, the more sort of, I don't want to say frustrated, but I started to have like a clearer vision of what I wanted my sound to come across as, and was feeling like other people were getting close, but I wanted to know more about the recording side of things in general, just so that I would be able to present that in the way that I wanted it to be presented. So that's when I started going down the home studio rabbit hole. And as soon as, I kind of got more acquainted with that world, when it came to like looking for people to do this with, the first thing I thought of, I was like, there has to be like a web platform for this. There has to be, like, I can't just be trolling Facebook musician groups to try to find this stuff. Yeah, and Sound Better is an amazing service. Like not only like I'm so thankful for it just for meeting you, if nothing else, but like there's a pile of musicians that I have like this long-standing working relationship on there that I would have never met in a million years otherwise, and that's incredibly special.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because obviously, I get to take advantage of the service on the other side, right? Like if I want to piece my song together with various elements and like whatever my imagination can come up with, there's somebody on Sound Better who does it. Because you're specializing in drums, and like various people are coming to you with different projects, different styles of music. What is that experience like? Like, do you find that people are really accepting of like the experience, like that you have a good experience? Do people get a little more fussy because it's their baby? Like what is that like for you as a person who is on Sound Better, kind of offering your wares?
Yeah, honestly, like it's almost like this bell curve kind of thing where I think when it's your first time hiring a total stranger, it's this like no notes kind of thing where they're just like, oh, like that's what the professional wants to do, and I don't know this person. And sometimes there's a little bit of apprehension there where I end up being surprised, like, and like I do this with you all the time, like if I'm unsure about an idea that I'm putting in, or if I'm making like a big change to an arrangement, I'll make a note about that and be like, how do you think about this? And I do find that like early on, when it's like a first timer, that stuff is always almost without fail, almost immediately just approved of just like, yeah, just do that. And then like, you get a little bit more comfortable and there's more back and forth kind of happening. There was one record, and I don't, I have a great relationship with this person. My friend Marco Deliso, we made a record during the throes of lockdown together, and there's a song on there called Jobin that I've actually done a playthrough of on YouTube, that I think we went back and forth on it 8 times. I think, and my final take count was something in the low 50s.
Oh wow!
Like, yeah, and it was just this like it was amazing. Like just trying and experimenting with different things, and like less and less and less and less. And, you know, I was only able to do that and have that like comfortable experimental working relationship with him because we had done some other stuff together beforehand. So we were a little bit more comfortable. And then I find when I have been working with somebody for a long time, they're kind of expecting what I'm going to do.
Mm.
And then whatever I do is close to what they had in their head, I guess. So it sounds like. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I have some experience in that department. So, I mean, I think like this is a story I've never told you. So 5 years ago, when I had decided to come back to music after, about a 20-year layoff, I didn't know what I was doing in the sense that like so much had changed, right? Because I came of age in an era where, you know, you scrape together as much money as you could from band members, you book studio time, you make a demo, and it most likely will suck. But, you know, in 2020, you know, I kind of had the same light bulb moment that you did, where it's like, well, there's got to be something out there. And so I'd found Sound Better, but I had no idea what I was doing, right? Like I was kind of picking up where I left off with a bunch of like singer-songwriter style songs, which ultimately I love, but it wasn't what I dreamt of doing, you know, from the time I first held a guitar. So not knowing what I was doing, I had 3 songs, and I you know, reached out to 3 separate drummers, you included. And I look back now, and obviously I'm happy with how each of those songs turned out, but I think like I won the lottery by you getting The Lighthouse, because it could have been any other song, you know, of that group. But it just so happened that when I was working on The Lighthouse, you were the drummer I had been looking at on Sound Better. So not knowing what to expect, I mean, obviously I listened to your samples. I knew you were like a very talented drummer, but you never know what you're going to get when you hand somebody your song, especially when you're not in the room with them. I gave you very basic notes. I remember specifically, I was like, here's this vibe that I'm kind of hearing with this song. And I linked you to something on Spotify and was like, just give it a listen to see what you think. You know, you don't have to play this. Just give me your thoughts. And what you sent back was even better than like what I could have possibly have put into words. But when I got your files and I'm immediately listening to your mix, my wife came in while I was listening to it, and she just started crying, like just like tears pouring down her face, crying. And like I knew at that point, like we had it, you know, like there was no like going back to you saying like, well, could you tighten this up, maybe use a couple more toms or whatever, right? Like it was just perfect. So that was the experience from you know, from my perspective. So do other people do that when they hire you as well, kind of like come in with an idea of, you know, already what they think they want and give you examples? Is that helpful to you, or do you prefer being able to interpret it your own way and kind of add your own touch?
Yeah, it's any and all information is always helpful, always. Like it's always relevant too, because it helps me get into the sort of like headspace of what my clients are looking for, always. But that is always being filtered through my own taste too, because like I might hear what they're going for and think like, that's close to what this song needs, I think. And then just trying to bridge the gap of like that, their taste versus my own, but always keeping like the song itself as like the guiding principle of like what choices I'm making and everything.
No, that's very cool. So that's probably a good opportunity for us to segue into conversation about our project, 12 Days in June. I'm gonna do a little music break here, right? Like before we dive into that part of the conversation, I want to put some tunes out here. Now, before we got together for this, I asked you for your picks. Like, give me a couple 12 Days in June songs that, you know, are special to you in one way or another, and like let's use those as our you know, our opportunity to talk about it. So as we're transitioning into the conversation about our project, you picked Bereft as your first song. So I would love to hear why you chose Bereft.
Man, it's so everything about, like, to me, this is like the perfect 12 Days in June song. This is like totally representative of everything that this project is, kind of like in one little contained package. I think it's some of the best melodies that you've ever written. The lyric is great, and like there's just like this feeling that I have when I listen to this one, with the way that the chords move, and the way the song sort of like escalates and rises and falls. And I don't know if we're calling it the chorus or the pre-chorus, but when you have this flurry of distorted, reverbed out stuff that just, it comes in and it just gives the song a lift every single time, and it just, I'm getting chills thinking about it. So like everything about this song, I just, it's perfect.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think when I talk about 12 Days in June, I really think of it as an advertisement for you, honestly. And like I try to use it as a way to, like, remind people, hey, if you like the drums on my work, like, you can have that on your work too. But what I really liked about Bereft, I think, is a classic example of what it's like to work with you, because this is a song that, I'll just be honest, it was a failed collaboration, which is something that happens a lot with me. But
I knew that about No Solace. I didn't know that about this one.
Yeah, yep, this one too.
Wow.
Yeah, I was working with a very talented singer-songwriter in the UK, and she just wasn't able to make it work in her schedule, which was fine. I was happy to take the song back, but the version I gave her was such a stripped down, bare bones framework. If you can imagine this song without any of the distortion, without any of the reverbed out shoegaze stuff, like, that's what the original was like. It was just like the really the capoed fourth fret clean guitar, like, that's all it was, which you can barely hear in the song now. But it's there. It's still the foundation.
Yeah, more felt than heard, maybe.
Exactly. But what I thought was so cool about it was that I added all the different layers and I brought it to you, and you had this idea about doing the crunchy loop intro. So like anyone who's listening to this, like, that didn't come from me. Like, I had an intro, but it was you that kind of sat with it and said, it'd be really cool. What if we did this? So not only did you add the drums to the song in totality, but like, you also put together this cool loop. You did some like production work where you're like, what if we did this fade in here? What if we did this? What if we put your voice like in this kind of like distant telephone effect? And it all just kind of came together for the first, what is that? I don't know, like 30 seconds or so of the song.
Yeah.
And then it was like, then come the drums, then comes the capoed clean guitar that you can barely hear for the rest of the song. And then, as my friend Unit from Comb Over Beethoven said, and then the distortion hits you like an ocean liner. And like, that's what I really enjoyed about this song, was just kind of all of those elements coming together. So kudos to you, Mr. Soucy, on all the work that went into this. So with that said, let's get into it. Here is the song Bereft, hand selected by Adam Soucy, my guest this week. From our album Stone Tape Theory, here's Bereft. right, and we're back. So again, bereft from our new album, Stone Tape Theory. Perfect opportunity to kind of like move this conversation into the 12 Days in June project. Again, you and I have been working together for 5 years. So I talked about what the experience was like for me, you know, how I found you, the first song that we started working on. After you delivered the files for The Lighthouse, I didn't even look at any other drummers. Like from that moment on, it was Adam or bust. Like that was it. and you can see that across everything that I've released. Like Adam is the drummer on 99% of everything that I've put out. But tell me a little bit about like what that was like for you, if you can remember. I know it was 5 years ago, but
oh no, I will never forget that, because The Lighthouse especially is so blunt, isn't direct. Like you are confronting your grief so directly in that song. It like in a way that is almost startling. And that really stuck with me initially. And I had a feeling that like whatever we did together after that, like whatever you were writing about, you were not going to pull any punches with like how you were approaching it and how you were feeling about the stuff that you were singing and writing about. So that immediately stood out to me. And also like on a technical musical level, the key change in the bridge on that song really struck me the first time that I heard it too, because I wasn't expecting it when it happened, and I was like, oh, like, and it is like, and it comes in this like this text painting kind of way of like that is when the story takes a turn, right? And you feel it in the composition as well as the lyric and everything, and yeah, so it blew me out of the water, like right away.
So what I'm hearing is that I was instantly your favorite.
Yeah, you got it.
But in all seriousness, I mean, obviously we went right from The Lighthouse into the rest of the album, Anhedonia, where again you did all but 2 songs, if I recall right, on that album. So you got a taste of like what I was going to be bringing you with The Lighthouse. What was your early impression as like, you know, the songs that started to follow? Because I know that we did Anhedonia a bit differently than we've done every album since, where now I give you all the songs at once, so that you can kind of hear the shape and flow of the album. But we did Anhedonia a bit more piecemeal, so you were getting songs, you know, at various points. I want to say we did like Bitter next, but like, yeah, I'm just curious.
Bitter was definitely the second one that you sent me. I don't remember the order after that, but I remember I remember Bitter because that was the first song that I tracked on my Sonar kit. So that's like I will remember that forever. But
I mean, how did you feel like as that project was coming together? Did it feel like I guess I don't want to say on par with The Lighthouse, but kind of like what you would have expected to follow? Were you like a little on the fence at first, and then it kind of started to like connect with you, or did you instantly like enjoy the songs and kind of have fun with that project?
I've always enjoyed what you send me. I think what was surprising to me, the deeper that we got into that record, was as more and more of your 90s grunge influence started to like trickle into the songs. That was surprising to me initially, because I think after The Lighthouse, I was expecting more of a straightforward singer-songwriter thing. And I think not to say that I was putting the project in a box, but that is what my expectation was. So the more pumpkinsy stuff that started to come in, the more I was like, oh, okay. Like, I see what he's doing. Like, yeah. And I specifically The Perfect Life on that record, I remember being like sort of a, not a turning point, but like sort of like a taste of things to come, I think, for me, for the rest of what we would work on.
Yeah, I took a big swing on that one. You know, bringing in like an actual like professional or a composer and arranger, like cellist player, like I really wanted that song to hit, and you know, it has like a lot of emotional significance to me. and like the strings just kind of like brought all that together. And I remember thinking like, wow, Adam didn't even get to hear this with the strings in.
Yeah, I was pretty blown away
was
when I heard the final mix that first time. Like, oh.
it was fun for me because, you know, after I had kind of like, you know, sort of taking your measure as a drummer, and not just as a drummer, but like your ideas and like the way that you were contributing to the songs, it really, I think that's what kind of sparked me to pursue like kind of getting back on track with what I wanted to do as a musician. You know, like you said, I really started to incorporate more of that 90s grunge influence, which is always where I wanted to be. But, you know, when I was writing songs post 90s, so, you know, sometime in the mid aughts, that's just where we were musically, right? There was like kind of this rise of singer songwriter, and all I had at that time was an acoustic guitar. So everything in my head, it was hard to visualize anything beyond kind of like bedroom folk. And that was great. Like I'm really happy with where it was. But after we did Anhedonia, I was immediately inspired to kind of get back on track. And we moved on to Nostalgia like shortly thereafter. I think I was like piecing it together while we were working on Anhedonia. But it was actually you that kind of came back with the feedback like, yeah, man, we need to go harder. and so I was like, yeah, we had a couple songs on Nostalgia that were a bit harder. Quarantine, you had so much fun with Quarantine. At least to my ears, you know, kind of listening to you put all these different creative things together. I think it was
busted a snare head on that one.
Yeah, I remember that. And it was like one of the first songs where like you had brought in the I believe at the time you called it trash drums. So we kind of had like some of the crunchy elements that showed up on a few songs. So obviously our style of music shifted. You know, we began this journey together doing more folksy singer-songwriter stuff. Then we started to, you know, slowly incorporate more of like the 90s grunge until we, you know, eventually got to La Luna, where it was like, okay, now we're like starting to hit a turning point here. I mean, at least that's when I felt it. So
oh no, I wholeheartedly agree. Like,
yeah, we shifted, I mean, completely at that point. And I think at that point, with you and I doing 2 albums together, we just clicked. We, you know, really gelled as you know, as a team. So I'm curious about what that experience is like for you, working as a session player, or and forgive me if that's the wrong terminology, but I don't know how to describe sound better. But I'm curious, like, people come at you with a variety of different genres. I mean, again, you and I have done multiple genres in our own albums, but I'm curious, like, what is that like for you? Because I can't imagine that you universally love all genres. So if somebody brings something to you that is not necessarily, you know, your favorite type of music personally, like, how do you combat those challenges? Like, do you just find a way to like kind of break it down and like think about, well, how can I enhance this? How can I make this, you know, what it wants to be? Or is it a struggle?
Yeah, so it's never, I mean, it's harder, you know, if I'm working on something that I don't like explicitly connect with. And I am very, very genre friendly in general.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, you know, like I've grown very, very tired of running into like other musicians that are like, oh, I listen to everything except this and this. And I'm like, all right, man, like there is good music to be found inside of every box. So like the like intention is so much more important to me than actual style. So as long as I'm working on something that I feel is honest, I'll find a way to make it work. And if it's, you know, like I am no great fan of the sort of like modern pop country thing. But I do it a lot. And what that experience for me is largely like, I sort of change my mindset and I go like, I am going to make this sound as much like a Nashville record as I possibly can. And that becomes the sort of like the guiding principle of the thing, rather than trying to just like inject my own taste into something and like stepping all over what somebody else is making, you know, because it's their baby, it's not mine.
No, I totally get that. Yeah, I can imagine like just I think about like the mixes that you send back to me. I used to feel really guilty when I would send you notes at the beginning, because I'd be like, hey, Adam, here's this new song I'm working on. And I would give you like the most generic points where it's like, yeah, it's like this kind of song. So if you remember this song, one of the things that I've always been really curious about is, and you can be totally honest here, what are the biggest challenges working with me? Because I'm a little older than you. So a lot of the influences that I may reference when I give you a song, and I'll use our cover of Swerve Driver's Duel is a really good example, which was written before you were born. So that feels good. But I'm curious, like, do you find that to be a challenge if I'm kind of, asking you to channel this like era of music where you were either not born or very, very, very young? Or do you have fun, like kind of visiting these eras of music from like earlier periods?
No, it's a blast. It really is. And Swerve Driver is a great example of this, because like I had never heard of that band. I had never heard the song. And you go and you do a little research and you listen to things, and now suddenly I have another album that I like to listen to in my free time. And I've gone through it quite a few times on my own. So no, like it's a joy. And I'm so curious as a person in general that I love getting handed something that is foreign to like my own tastes, or just new in general. Like new is always good.
That's true. Well, speaking of terrible notes, sending you things, one of the things that I've really appreciated working with you is your ability to hear beyond what I hear, which is why I come to you, right? Like that's why I have been working with you all this time. But you have this ability to, I guess, dissect music at the earliest stage, right? Because when I send you files, you're the first person to hear it, the first person to touch it. So you're only getting my guitar layers, and you're getting usually like really shitty scratch vocals. Sorry.
Dude, you would not believe some of the stuff I have been sent in the past. You would not believe. Truly.
Okay, well, that makes me feel at least a little better. But something that fascinates me about your process is that you will spend a lot of time just sitting with that guitar bed, like just listening to the guitars, and then kind of forming your ideas of like how you want to attack it. So I'm curious what that's like for you. Like, how much time do you spend with like a beatless, guitar bed? And like, how do those ideas start coming to you when you start thinking about like, beyond just traditional drums? Like you're throwing in shakers, you're throwing in things I can't even pronounce, but you're like, hey, here's this cool drum I never use. And then it's like the coolest sounding thing ever. So I'm just kind of curious, like before you even touch your kit, like what is that process like for you to, absorb that material?
Man, I'm gonna try to explain this as best I can, because it is so instinctual and impulsive most of the time, where because basically like what I do when we start a new project together, like you send me a big folder, and in that folder there's a subfolder for every song, and in that subfolder there's the 3 layers that I'm going to be working with, right? Which is usually placeholder bass, placeholder vocals, and guitars. So I build a template for like my tracking setup, just so that I can get the technical stuff out of the way. Like it's one terrible day of my life where I'm just like routing things in the mixer and everything. And I go through, build one for every song, and I make section markers as I listen through the first time. And when I'm making those markers, it's sort of like this sandwich of trying to listen to what's happening currently, remembering the context of the section that happened before, and trying to anticipate what happens next. And how I respond to my own anticipation of what I think is coming will inform those other decisions that I make. So a lot of times, like, take a song that won't be coming out for a while, Soothe, right? On paper, there's just an A section and a B section, really.
Yeah,
like,
it's so simple.
But for me, like, within those, there are these micro layers of dynamics of, like, yeah, maybe the riff is the same, but the vocal left. So because the vocal's gone, what else can I bring in there? Or like, at the very end of the song, there's like this dissonant, the riff changes a little bit and it gets like a little bit more tense. And when I hear something like a chord change like that makes me feel tense, I think, okay, how can I emphasize this tension? Is that a drum fill? Is that a busier pattern? Is that another thing playing 16th notes? Like, and I will just like kind of play around and experiment with that. Like, there are times where I do full passes of these like auxiliary percussion layers, and then I listen back to the whole thing and I go, that sucks, and I just delete it all. Like, you know, because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like,
yeah, I mean, Soothe in particular was probably like one of my favorite outros you've ever done. Just like, because the song is just like a speeding train for like 3 minutes, but then like we get to the end and you start doing this like really cool like staccato pattern, like or like, I don't know, I always say stalls because I don't know drummer terms, forgive me, but like you really change up the pattern in a noticeable way where it's just like, oh my god, that sounds so cool. So I'm excited to finish up that EP so other people can hear it too. Yeah, I mean, you've always been really good at like adding other elements, like you said, the auxiliary layers, like adding shaker or tambo and like things that, like, I haven't really thought about. And on the new album, Stone Tape Theory, there's a song called Monster where going in, I don't know, I guess like I wasn't really thinking about how this one was going to turn out, because I could tell from just the guitar layers, like this sounds very like 2010s, which is unusual for me. I don't, you know, I'm not often writing songs that sound like from that era, but like it was definitely like in that wheelhouse. And when you added tambourine to the choruses, I was like, oh my god, we're done. Like this is the most amazing thing ever. Like, I'm sending you samples from like Under Oath and like all these other things. Like, I'm trying to make the song something it isn't, and you're just like, no. Here, check this out. So I love that. I love the collaboration between, you know, you and I, because you're not afraid to give me your ideas, because if you hear something I don't like, I want that from you. I want you to be like, hey, what you have is cool, but like, here's what it could be. So thank you. I think, you know, in particular, something I get asked a lot is like, you know, do you have a band? And like, technically I don't, right? Like 12 Days in June is just kind of the, you know, the artist name I use. But honestly, I do think of you as part of the band. Like, I do think of you as the drummer. Obviously I have the luxury of saying that as the, you know, the person behind the name. But was there ever a point where you started to feel like, you know, hey, I do feel like I'm a part of this band, like my voice matters, like I'm helping shape these songs, like this is not just, you know, me recording drums for this guy in New York, like I actually am a part of this? Like, was there ever a point that you felt like that, or do you have to try to kind of separate those feelings from the professional side?
No, so with you, and you know, this is a luxury of, you know, 5 years of working together. I think the turning point for me was La Luna, where that felt like such a deep collaboration that I really felt like I had a lot of influence over. That was really like the moment where I was like, oh, like I am a part of this. Like I'm not just a hired gun, and it's really special. Like it really is.
No, I completely agree. And, you know, I want to give a shout out to you know, the other member of this trio, John Thomason, who, you know, John is such an accomplished bass player. I found him, you know, because he had worked with like Juliana Hatfield and Matt Nathanson, both of whom I adore greatly. And then all the while it's like, and he's also the band leader of Little Big Town.
Yeah.
And
It's
I'm like,
so, that
okay.
is so crazy to me. That's still so crazy to me every time that I interact with him. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
right. But I reached a kind of a similar point with John where I was like, John probably doesn't think of himself as like part of the band, like he's obviously got like way bigger things going on in his life. But him and I just finished working on the EP. So obviously you've been done for a little while. So him and I just finished the bass parts. And what was cool is that, obviously we just did a whole album, right? So this EP is exactly what I think it needs to be. Like, it's 4 songs and I think we're good. But John had sent me a note after we finished the last song and he was like, "This sucks that we're done." And I was just like,
yeah.
That's like the coolest thing he could have possibly said. It sucks that we're done. And because I just don't, John and I don't have a lot of interaction. I have way more interaction with you than I do with John. So I wasn't sure, like, how he kind of felt about it. And it was just like getting that kind of vote of confidence, right? Where he's having a lot of fun. He tells me this, right? Where it's like, man, like your songs are getting so much more like rock influence. Like I'm just having so much fun. So I'm going to pose the same question to you, right? Like our sound has been evolving, as we talked about, like over the last few albums. And we've already kind of talked about La Luna being that turning point. So like, is there a point for you too, where you're just like, man, this is just fun. Like, this is like making music that I really enjoy.
Yeah. Like, yes. No, man, every time you come to me with like one of these massive folders, I'm not daunted. I'm like, here we go. Yeah, it's an absolute joy. And like, the amount of creative freedom that you allow me on this project is so inspiring. And like, even like when we're in the midst of this stuff, like in my day-to-day life outside of working on the project, I just feel like I'm in a better mood like at all times. Cause yeah, it's a blast working on this stuff with you, man.
Awesome. I appreciate that, man. It's so cool. We're almost done here. I only have like a couple last questions. So I would be remiss to not talk about Stone Tape Theory, right? Our latest album. It just came out about 2 weeks ago on Bandcamp. It's getting ready to hit streaming services on the 27th of this month. So only about 2 weeks from now. So I'm curious from your perspective, right? So I said this earlier on Threads that when I go back and I listen to Heareth, I hear an artist that's still trying to find themselves, but getting very close. And when I listen to Stone Tape Theory, I hear an artist who's reached their destination. So I'm kind of curious how you feel, like working with me over 5 years. This is is this our 5th album? It is our 5th album together. So. Not counting the EP, which we haven't talked about because that's forthcoming. But needless to say, we've done a lot together. So I'm kind of curious, like when you got that massive folder for Stone Tape Theory and you were about to dive in, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But what was going through your mind as those first tracks kind of hit your ears?
Yeah, so let me think, because I think the first one I tackled was Thrall, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, there was a lot we did on this record that we're playing with space more than I think we ever have been. Like, especially there's so many times where it is like bass drums and vocals, and then like the song kind of like expands and retracts as it happens. That felt like a really huge development, especially off of the last one. But I do agree with you that like this does feel like a sort of landing point. And there's an interesting trilogy, I think, with La Luna, Hyreth, and this one, where like, and I remember you saying at the time, like when La Luna came out, you were like, I've found my sound, right? that is like the sort of like arrival point. Hyreth is playing in that playground a little bit more. getting really, really close, I think, to like realizing his full potential. And now Stone Tape is absolutely like we are there. And it's a really gratifying arc to actually like listen to all three of those records back to back like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've done that, recently just to kind of gauge my progress. And when we worked on La Luna, the goal for me was to get back on track, like we've already talked about. Like I definitely never saw myself as a singer-songwriter. At least that was never my goal. Nostalgia was an album that I absolutely just had to do. Those were, most of those songs were like written in the 90s. And I just wanted to put a fresh coat of paint on them to be like, what would they sound like today? And when I go back and listen to it, like it's still not where I think it would be. But then like we got to La Luna and it was like, now I'm writing fresh material, for the first time in a long time. I'm not playing catch up anymore. Like I'm actually moving forward. And when I think about like what I wanted to accomplish, like why I started making music in the first place as a teenager in the 90s, and like La Luna was like, that was the album I would have like loved to have made, in like 95, 96. And it probably, it might have done well back in those days, but then I just kept pushing where it's like, but it's not quite there yet. It's still not quite there. It's not the sound I'm hearing in my head. And sure, like I'm always going to forever be chasing Siamese Dream, right? Like any Smashing Pumpkins fan who makes music is always going to be chasing Siamese Dream, and we'll never get there. But it was like inching closer and closer, right? And when we made the last record, I was really inspired by what would 90s alternative rock sound like today. So I hired like a big modern producer, who's worked with like a lot of really cool modern bands. And like, I remember sharing the first mixes with you and I was so excited. I couldn't wait for you to hear it. And you were like the voice of reason, where it's like, okay, yeah, this sounds cool. And like, I don't want to detract from what you're going for, but like what I'm hearing is like super overblown and modern. And I don't feel like that's what we're going for. And I don't know if I ever told you, but like that really stuck with me. Like having you be, the voice of reason, to be like, hey, like cool if that's the direction you want to go, but I don't think it's the direction we want to go. And you were so right. And it was like going back to Ben, who produced the album, and like just giving him your notes and saying like, hey, like keep the guitar forward, right? Like I think we can all agree like that's what we're going for, but like let's not try to make this sound like a 2024 modern rock band, like or somebody who's like inspired by early aughts new metal. Like let's get back to the 90s, like let's get back to it. And when I listen to it, it still sounds like very modern production. And like in my head I was like, oh man, I'm getting so close to that Siamese Dream sound. And like people will listen to it and they'll tell me how much they love it. And it's like, oh, it reminds me of all these bands from like 2005. And I'm like, damn it, I missed the mark by like 10 years. So for me, like Stone Tape Theory was trying to find that balance of still sounding modern, because I don't want to sound like a 90s band. I want to sound,
you never want to sound retro.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that was the goal with this album. And so I shifted to a different producer. Matt Doherty, who is a massive Silverchair fan. So I was like, okay, like I think this is going to be the right person for the job. And he just nailed it. And
yeah, he knocked it out of the park. He really did. Like,
yeah, I'm so happy with how it sounds. I've seen multiple people comment on like, it's the best my guitars have ever sounded. But I also want to point out your drums sound so good in these mixes, because it sounds like you're there with me now. Like in the past, the guitars are just kind of like overblowing the mix, but like now I still have those loud guitars, but you're there too. So as a producer yourself, you have a lot of experience. I mean, how are you feeling about the final mixes?
This is our best sounding record, full stop. Like it, and I can say that without reservation, not to discredit anybody else. Like I think the super modern thing that Ben went for on High Ref, he did amazingly well. Like But as far as like, you know, when I'm thinking about my first listen through these songs before I have played a single note and picturing like the final sound of what I like, the finish line, right? When I'm picturing that in my head, what Stone Tape Theory sounds like is what I am picturing. And that is so gratifying to hear. Like, I think I told you when I first listened through, just giving like my initial feedback on it, like I was having a hard time staying objective with it because I was just like getting swept up in the songs. And that's the best compliment that I could ever give a mix engineer. So bravo,
Yeah.
Matt. Really, really nice work.
Yes. Thank you, Matt, if you ever hear this. And you know, I will be working with Matt again on the EP. So I think the sound that we've kind of dialed in with Stone Tape Theory is going to spill over, but also our EP sounds a little different. You know, not like dramatically different, but like you can already tell like the songwriting and structure have shifted a bit, while still kind of maintaining that. So I'm excited to wrap up, you know, the EP. I think again, like some of the songs we've been working on there are so cool. Like these don't sound like songs that got cut from Stone Tape Theory. They definitely sound like their own thing. So I'm really, really, really stoked to finish this up. And then from the future, you know, for the future, we'll see what happens. I imagine I'll be, you know, bugging you with more stuff as we go. Well, we're about out of time. So I want to thank you again for carving out time out of your day. Like it's so cool to sit and talk with you and really just kind of reminisce about the past, talk about what we're doing now, but actually do it face to face.
Yeah.
I can't say enough positive things about working with you. It's just been a tremendous experience. That's why you've been my guy for 5 years. So that's not changing as long as you'll have me. I'm so excited that I was able to introduce Charity to you. The work that you're doing with her is fantastic. She's just sent me a rough mix of her album that she's working on, and it's like I can hear you like 1,000%. Even if I didn't know it was you, I would know it was you. Like I recognize you anywhere. So before we wrap up, we have a second song for 12 Days in June. So we're gonna go out with No Solace on an Endless Night, which wow, the history of this song. I'm just gonna frame it, and then I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about why you picked this song. But this song was special to me because it began as a collaboration with a shoegaze artist whom I love. And I really thought, man, I would love to work with this guy. And we tried. It just ultimately didn't work out. But they were still able to contribute to kind of the overall arrangement. And like provided some like fun ideas of like what the beats could sound like, which is what I sent you, and you know, kind of like just said, hey, give me your interpretation of, you know, what you would do with this song. And obviously, like I'm disappointed that the collab didn't pan out, but at the same time, I think we ended up with something very, very cool in its own right. So that's kind of like the brief history of how this song came to be, not counting I want to say I put 32 layers of guitar on this one, which is still not our peak. I think Good Night, Sweetheart is still our peak.
Almost enough. It's almost enough.
It's almost. But there's just so much happening in this song. So I would love to get your thoughts, you know, like why you selected this one. Tell me, you know, your thoughts on No Solace for an Endless Night.
Yeah, there is there's a very distinct melancholic quality to this one that just really speaks to me in a way that is difficult to explain. Like my first reaction to this was just, it was very strong. I felt very emotional as I tracked this one the entire time, which doesn't always happen. And yeah, I again, like the emotional arc of this song is just like so beautiful, with like the rise and fall of, like, you know, it's so intimate at the beginning, where it is just like a couple layers of guitars, drums, and vocals, right? That grows and develops, and these different characters come in, like the vibrato guitar in the second verse. I absolutely love when that comes in. And it builds to this bridge that totally explodes, and you go, wow, that was amazing. And then the song kind of lulls for a second, and you're like, oh, we're not done. And then the ending happens, and it is, I think it's the single most emotionally cathartic moment on the entire record. It is so incredible.
That's why I had to put it in that middle spot. Just like it just felt like that's where it should go on the album, for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess we're doing like a Shakespearean like 5-act structure sort of thing. And interesting thing about this one too, this is one single drum take with no punch-ins.
That's amazing. I mean, you told me that, and I was like, wow. Like, I don't even know how you would tackle that, but I mean, obviously I've seen you do the live drum playthroughs of like a couple of our songs in the past, and it's just so much fun watching you play, because obviously I don't get to be in the room when you're doing it, so seeing it like pre-recorded like that, it's just so cool. Yeah, man, I guess with that said, we can dive into No Solace on an Endless Night here. Just one thing before we do, again, I just want to thank Jack Sullivan for everything they contributed to the song. I think that I gave Jack a songwriting credit because it was important to distinguish that without Jack's ideas on the arrangement, this song wouldn't have ended up the way it did. Yeah, it would have been different. The version that I sent Jack once upon a time was dramatically different than how it ended up, and just their ideas of how it could work even better is how we got to where we are. So Jack, if you're listening, thank you. It was an honor and a privilege to work with you on this. I think the song turned out, just amazing. And here we go. No Solace on an Endless Night from the new 12 Days in June album, Stone Tape Theory. Awesome. And there we go. No Solace on an Endless Night from Stone Tape Theory. Again, available now on Bandcamp if you want to check it out early. If you prefer to stream, no judgment. It is coming out June 27th across all platforms where you get your music. My guest this week has been Adam Soucy, drummer extraordinaire. Just a absolute pleasure to chat with you, Adam. Before we wrap, are there any final thoughts, any plugs you want to make, anything you want to leave us with?
No, and it's been an absolute joy talking to you face to face finally. And yeah, man, I say this every time that we finish a project, but I am so thankful that you continue to want to collaborate with me. Like, and it's, yeah, I'm very lucky, and that feels really special to me. As far as stuff to plug, I don't know. I have a folk project that I've been working on for the better part of a year with Mosby and the Northern Flicker that I'm really excited about. We put out a song called Perspective a couple weeks ago that I'm really proud of. So if people want to listen to that, that's cool.
Awesome. I assume available everywhere at this point?
Available everywhere. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, be sure to tuck some links in there for folks to find that. And also, if you're an artist in need of a drummer, I'll also be sure to include some links of where you can find Adam on SoundBetter and get some awesome drum work going in your music too. Adam, thanks again for your time. Super appreciate it. This was an honor to chat with you face to face after all these years. I'm looking forward to working with you on more stuff as we go. So keep an eye on that inbox.